Let me bring out my panel. Nerima Wako is with us, Executive Director of the Siasa Place. Also joining us is Teresa Omondi-Adeitan, Executive Director of FIDA, and Dr. Alex Awiti is back with us, Public Intellectual. I like that title.
I know what that means.
And Professor Macharia Munene, who teaches history, I believe, at USIU Africa. Thank you all for coming in. First of all, everybody is thanking the President for having selected our son, our daughter, to join the cabinet. You were shaking your head as that was running. Nerima, go for it.
Well, we should be thanking the President for selecting people based on merit, not necessarily because this is my child. Thank you for noticing them for the good work they've done and rewarding them. If that was the case, then why have these seats based on merit then? We might as well just now start assigning our relatives. And that's what it looks like we're heading toward.
Professor Munene, your reaction to this whole cabinet and the early reactions?
Thank you. It's good to be together with Nerima again, and Alex. Never been with her, but it's good people.
Right.
And the President's appointment of the cabinet was long awaited for. I would say long overdue. But the appointment came out very well. It is balanced. He went out of his way, at least, to give the impression of being balanced. The fact that some people are celebrating and others are mourning is irrelevant to the whole thing.
All right, whoever is calling Professor Munene, he's on TV. He's going to call you as soon as he's done.
So the thing is...
Excellent.
Okay. No, the point was getting the right people who will help him on what he says his big four.
Right.
And if any of the people appointed there is not going to deliver on an aspect of the big four, then that appointment is useless if it does not fit in. Where the person comes from is irrelevant. And I think that was going on. Okay. Who can deliver and who cannot. To that extent, he did a very good job.
Okay. Was it balanced, Teresa?
I'm actually surprised that he's saying it was balanced. I'm still waiting for the two-third gender principle to be followed and at least our constitution to be upheld. That's one of the things that the President promised us as he was being sworn in. And clearly, we have still fallen short of the number of women who are expected in the cabinet. And looking at whatever qualifications that are being used, if it's sons and daughters, I believe they are daughters who can do it. If it's about tribes, I believe there are women who belong to tribes that can do it. If it's about competency, we've said it over and over again, there are women who can do it. So I'm actually here in as much as I would want to congratulate the women who, at least some who still maintained their positions as cabinet secretaries, some who are new, and we wish them luck in the service to Kenyans, and even the ones who served before. We congratulate them, and we say they are actually women who can do this job. So we just need to attain the provisions in our constitution about gender balance.
Dr. Awiti, what do you make of this cabinet?
I think, as Professor said, it was long overdue. But I'm disappointed that it took that long to create that list of a lot of men and very few women. As Teresa said, it is not for a lack of competent women in this country. And I'm sure the last time when we were here on your show, as viewers will recall, I said, why can't Kenyatta even exceed that two-third gender rule in favor of one-third gender rule in favor of women? It would send a very strong signal. But my other disappointment is that Mr. Kenyatta, like his predecessors, has failed to really grapple with the necessary task of government structure and function.
How so?
It is unwieldy in the sense that you've created this cabinet administrative secretaries, and I think it's going to create just the same problem. I think what we were trying to figure out in the first iteration of the Constitution, when we scrapped the position of assistant minister, there was a vacuum there, clearly, in terms of who would be a deputy minister, or was that role even necessary? I think that's where the hard work should have been, to reconstitute how government works. We don't have to fall into the same old traps of the colonists. We should reimagine government and make government fit for function. Uhuru has said he has these big four. I'm not sure that the gentlemen, lot of gentlemen, and the few women who were there will necessarily deliver that. It's not, in my view, I don't see any competence that Mr. Kiunjuru would bring to the Ministry of Agriculture. I think what we're trying to say is that anybody can be anything in this country at that cabinet level. I think we're not being very serious by paying attention to the caliber of men that we appoint to these positions. I'm not sure. Amina is, Ambassador Amina has had a mixed record in many senses at the Foreign Affairs. I would want to see what exactly should bring into a ministry as complex as education, and at a time when we are on the cusp of birthing a new curriculum that even Matiang'i has not been able to explain.
Okay. So the president, in introducing this new position of Chief Administrative Secretary, which does not exist in the Constitution, actually went back to the Constitution. He said in section 132(4)(a), I want to ask you this, Teresa, and that section says the president may perform any other executive function. Actually, I'm reading that the wrong. Yes, that's the one. May perform any other executive function provided for in this Constitution or in national legislation, and except as otherwise provided for in this Constitution, may establish an office in the public service in accordance with the recommendation of the Public Service Commission. So does he have legal cover to establish this position?
Actually, when we heard about these positions, we thought, oh, okay, now he's using that any other duty. You know, like you can also establish any other administrative office to make the cabinet run. Okay, one of the issues that we'd have then is, in as much as it comes in as something that Kenyans are not prepared for, are these men and women going to be vetted just like any other state officers, so that we are assured that even as they come in to assist, whatever assistance that they're bringing in, they've also been vetted and they're the right people to work in those offices.
So you're saying legally he can't do so?
I think so. With that provision of the Constitution, he can do any other thing that will enable him to deliver for Kenyans.
Do these men and women need to be vetted?
I think so, yes. They need, because they are going to be state officers, and just like any other state officers who are being vetted, they need to be vetted.
Professor Munene, are these just assistant ministers?
In the final analysis, they are assistant ministers. And actually about 2013-14, I remember raising the issue with some people that the ministers were being overwhelmed. The few that were there, some of them were holding very big dockets. And I raised the issue. There is need. The Constitution does not specify have an assistant minister. It at the same time does not say you cannot have one. Okay? So it's up to the president to maneuver. And what he has done is to find a way of answering the call that if he's going to have the government deliver on his promises, then he needs a team. There are roles that the minister plays. They cannot be played by a PS, no matter what you try to do. Because these are policy positions, these are political positions, and if you notice, most of the people he's appointed, they tend to be politically savvy people.
They're all politicians.
Yeah, they know their game, because they'll be needed in some places to explain policy, to explain something that an ordinary PS would have a problem. And there is the protocol kind of thing. So you invite Alex there because of that position. And then to come and bring somebody 2 ranks below, it just doesn't match up. So there is good reason for creating this position. One, the workload. First of all, we don't have as many ministers as we used to be. We used to have. The Constitution cut them down. And some ministries are so big, they need help. So we look at that. The question that we need to be raising is, are these people going to deliver or not? That's the main thing.
Why not just call them deputy cabinet secretaries?
Well, that's the privileges of the president to think of what he can call people. So
I think they should also be more technical people rather than politicians, if that is the essence of them coming in to bring values to the
no, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No.
Let me just weigh in there. I think one of the things, and this has been my biggest struggle over the years, in terms of how do we get a government that is lean, fit for purpose? There's enough technical people below the permanent secretary, really smart Kenyans who really understand the business of the fields. They're actually professionals in those fields. What I think hasn't happened is creating sufficient room for them, and creating strong enough processes for them to support the political appointees. And even that coordination, I think that's where the problem is.
Because, Nerima, all these chief administrative secretaries are all old hands politicians, former governors, former MPs, former senators who lost but supported Jubilee, so they have been rewarded.
Yeah, they have been rewarded, and I believe it's also Governor Nanok who actually thanked the president for that, for seeing former governors now moving up, in a sense, being promoted. But I have to go back to what Professor has mentioned in terms of it appears that we already have an issue with bureaucracy within our government. So adding more people doesn't solve the situation. And if we look at our Public Service Commission, the average age is between 50 to 59. So we are going to see a lot more people retiring in the next few years, and there's going to be a gap because there are not many young people coming in. And then we're also seeing repetitive kind of roles within these positions. So as much as we're saying that there's a lot that people are dealing with and they could use their assistance, we could also cut down on the repetitive roles that we're seeing, and also the public wage. It's too high. So we have to also be concerned about having, this is now an additional 38 positions that we're talking about, which brings it up to 82. And how are we going to pay for that?
That's interesting you mentioned that, because President Kibaki's Grand Coalition government had 44 ministers because they had to share positions, etc. How is this different from President Kibaki's Grand Coalition government?
He wasn't spending money on devolution. You see, the pie hasn't grown, but the number of people who actually draw the pie has grown substantially. Remember, we've increased the number of MPs. For instance, we have senators.
Right.
We have county assembly people who are drawing certainly more money than the councillors used to draw.
Right.
So I think the whole structure of our government is something that we really must go. I love the Constitution, but I think we need to start thinking really hard about whether it specifies the right levels of government that is able to deliver on the mission of the people. I think there's a disjunction there. The Constitution settled tried to settle a very important problem, a political problem. But when you look at the delivery of services to ordinary people, this is trying to settle a dispute among the political elite. How do we divide these things so we reduce the amount of wrangling and fighting? They try to do that to some extent. Now, what about the work of the people?
The political elite, Nerima, because there's not a lot of young people who have come into these positions, the youth you represent, because all the former cabinet secretaries have gotten nice ambassador positions. Austria and France and Belgium and UNESCO.
Actually, those were the ones who supposedly did badly.
Yes.
And they got such lush positions. And that's something that a lot of young people have been saying. There are very many. In fact, I saw there was a youth group that had stood out, and they had sent to the president about 100 names that they thought of young people who could sit in cabinet positions. All he had to do was select one of the names and vet them. So it's disappointing to young people to see that. And there are very many young people who are capable. I think at the moment, the youth group between 18 to 35 years old is about 70% of this country. So we have seen firsthand that definitely the youth are not cared for at all, and the women either.
You know, Larry,
really quickly, sir, I need to go to break.
The youth are perpetual presence. Yeah? In the 1960s, we had them, and they made the same complaint. In the 70s, we had them, the same complaints. In the 90s, the same. Now, it's the same issue. The youth, the youth, the youth. What will happen is that people graduate. Sometimes they forget that they've stopped being youth, and they continue being youth, even now. So, like now, you have the 10-year-olds. Look at Nerima there and say she's very old. There's a difference. We want a 10-year-old now to be in charge of this and this, which then ends up being negating the essence of what is supposed to be done.
Hang on, Prof.
No, Tom Mboya was 27 by the time he was Secretary General. We can name from James Orengo to Miguna to also Raila Odinga, who was youthful. They started in universities, including Professor Anyang' Nyong'o. So you cannot talk about the young people always complaining about the same things. There was a time young people were involved in political movements in this country. And right now we can see they are, but they take the back seat, the buttress, where they are used for political manipulation, but they are not necessarily leading in any political parties.
No, they are leading. What you are missing is that, what I was saying is that the issue of the youth complaining has always been there. It's not new.
Something about
it is not there. I mean, it's not something new. And it is always going to be there. Now, is it that there are no youth put in the various positions? That is not true. Yeah?
What do you mean that's not true?
6%.
All the top leadership positions have not gone to youth, who are 70% of the population. You don't think they need to be represented in how they're governed?
There should be broad representation on governance, but you also look at the entire constitution afresh. So what does this constitution say? It says no one should be discriminated against on account of age, on account of
Gender?
or wherever they come from.
Okay.
It's a question of looking. The president has a plate full of things, and he has got limited opportunities. Now, it is not necessarily true that all the cadre, all people demanding positions, are going to be accommodated.
Okay.
It is not true.
All right.
And it is necessary for people to come to say some sort of sense that it is not always going to be that what I demand, I must get.
Okay.
What I demand, I must get. No.
I want to pick up on this when we come back, because I think there's still a lot to be said about what Prof is saying, that argument which I find to be very interesting. We're going to come back and discuss a bit more and preview the week ahead, whether or not some swearing in will be taking place. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Weekend Edition. We're still talking about the cabinet that was. And Professor Macharia Munene, just before we went to break, told us that it is not possible to include all the groups agitating for inclusion in the cabinet. The youth, the women. I think that was the point he was making. Teresa, go for it.
I'm actually disappointed at that statement for only one reason. When we discovered it was very difficult for one leader to decide who gets where, we came up with formulas that are in the Constitution. 5% for people living with disability, we have another 5% for the youth, we have a third at least for either gender, depending on who is more on the other side. And I think it's so simple, just to stick by the book and the Constitution. And again, like where I started from, whatever criteria you'd use, you'd find both men, women, and youth who can fit in that criteria. Currently, if it's the tribe he used, if it's a political allegiance, if it's regional balance, there are youth, women, people with disability who belong in those categories. So I don't think he had any difficult job to choose.
You want to respond to that, because it's a central argument that has always been made that you can't possibly include everyone. And in principle, it's true. You can't possibly include everyone.
Well, in principle, now you can, because Uhuru suddenly has 82 positions that he can give, and we only have 45 tribes by the last count, or 43 or whatever. So, but you see, the thing really is, and I think this is the really disappointing conversation, and I would hope that ourselves who support the media process in trying to break these conversations into ways that the public can engage in, is we should start asking questions about merit. I don't care how many Dorobos you put in cabinet, or how many Kikuyus in cabinet. You know, even though there are those constitutional provisions, I think Kenyans need to go back to merit, and these not just being jobs. Because what we see now with Shebesh and all these guys dancing around is, oh my God, the president has honored me. It's not about them. It's about what competences they bring to these positions to help the president deliver on his agenda. And I think this should be the primary consideration, and that Kenyans should not see these people as rewards to their ethnic people, and who basically go back and say, you know, like the guy from Busia was saying, there's a lot of Luyas in NASA, but they were shortchanged the parliamentary committee positions, etc. I think that's a very unfortunate argument. The argument should be, based on who is in there, we ask one at a time, what would Shebesh bring into Uhuru's cabinet as a cabinet administrative secretary? What is her track record in public service? And I think this is where we ought to go, because at the end of the day, how is my tax money spent? My tax money is spent well when the president has constituted a competent group of people to work for the people, not their last names, and not who's going to be dancing, and people in Bomet now and Tarakaniti saying they've been shortchanged. Shortchanged about what?
At the same time, we're hearing at least Raphael Tuju's position in cabinet is tricky. He is a cabinet secretary who has been co-opted in on a need-be basis. Professor, you've been teaching for a while. Do you understand what this means?
There used to be a position called Minister Without Portfolio.
Yes.
And often it will be somebody who is a troubleshooter in case there is need for something to be done. and you need a forceful person. And you know, Rafael told you can be very forceful. So you need somebody to deliver.
But the president also has a presidential delivery unit, which is a fully staffed team that sits at KICC to do this sort of thing. And it is headed by Nzioka Waita, who's his chief of staff.
See, he came up with something called the Big Four. And the Big Four to be the benchmark of his performance at the end of it. One of the things missing in that Big Four is a coordinating entity, force. Now, Tuju being the Secretary General of Jubilee, he, I think, had a role in coming up with the Big Four. He's in tune with the president, thinking many things. So he might play that coordinating role to push this thing so that all the people, the forces, I mean, the interest in the delivery, get the thing done. The delivery unit you talk about, well, it's a bureaucracy. But some things require vigor. And if you can breathe, Tuju is going to be that man with the vigor to ensure that people see the delivery itself. This is an agenda,
right,
in terms of the Big Four. You know, like with Kibaki, there was this, the Vision 2030?
Yes.
And they said this is an item in Vision 2030. This one. So I guess what we may have now is somebody will be coming up. This is an item in the Big Four. This is an item in the Big Four. So there is a lot of work for Tuju to do. And I guess the president was saying he's not exactly sure about all of it, but he knows there's a lot of work for him to do.
Is that how you're reading it, Nerima?
No. It's interesting. It seems to me we love titles. So it's about having a fantastic name and with it an awesome salary. And Tuju has worked very hard. We've seen that with the party and how he's managed Jubilee. And so he needed to be recognized for that. But what can we place you in that fits the magnitude of work that you have done over the past few months? So it almost looks like, to me, gives him the freedom to be flexible and also for him to pick and choose where he feels comfortable working. And that is an awesome, awesome position that he's been offered. And that's what it looks like to me.
Okay, even though you argue as FIDA that President Kenyatta is flouting the law by not meeting that two-thirds gender principle, this cabinet is entirely going to go through because the vetting committee is made up of entirely Jubilee MPs because NASA has refused to participate. So when they actually do go through that committee, because Jubilee enjoys a majority in the House, they will all go through. Will that be a loss to Kenyans?
It will be a big loss. First, I think it will even be first a loss to the Jubilee government because they made promises to Kenyans to commit to the Constitution and deliver. So they will have flouted that promise, and more so they'll be acting in impunity because it's utter disregard of the Constitution, which is wrong. As FIDA Kenya will try and stop any appointment if it does not meet the two-third gender principle. We've done it before. We have like 5 decisions by the court on the two-third gender principle. Tomorrow we are in court again because of Parliament, the same Parliament that is going to vet them. We are saying it's unconstitutional because it has not met the two-third gender rule. But we'll still keep trying because we want to keep by the law. We want to be the ones obeying the law, probably lead by example, and let them know that we'll try and use all the institutional bodies to get it right. But I think really they have the opportunity to just get it politically correct and also to respond to the Kenyans.
Why is it so hard to pass this two-thirds gender principle? The last parliament tried and did not succeed.
I think it's just lack of political will. Exactly that. What was so hard about the president just adding one more woman and getting the 7 out of 22 at worst, because that's the minimum that he would have gotten, which is a third of 22 appointed. There are those who also argue a third of 25 when they count the president and the AG. That would be 9. But here we are even saying the minimum 7, you know? Just one more woman, and we can. Let me pick up from where Professor left, where he said, you're looking for people with a boss who can push up an agenda. I'm sure there's a woman who can do a better job than that one who has been given a minister for no without portfolio.
Yes.
Interesting term. there are women who are that strong who can do it. So I think it's just utter disregard for our constitution and playing games with the women of this country.
This cabinet is signed, sealed, and delivered. They will go through the voting committee, and then they will all go through because Jubilee has the majority. NASA, for whatever reason, is refusing to participate because they still refuse to recognize President Uhuru Kenyatta. What do you make of that?
Well, I guess this is, you know, Mr. Kenyatta made his bed and he has to lie in it. But I think part of the problem is that you alienate the public from an engaged conversation when the political class and the ruling elite refuse to listen. I think that's the tragedy, because then the country checks off. Yeah. And nobody's interested in who's... I think that's the apathy that Mr. Kenyatta should guard against. I think a leader should listen to the sentiments of the public. It's about being sensitive. It's about being respectful of the oath of office that you took. Yeah. And it's about just honoring the fact that you are the people's representative. And to basically say, we'll do it anyway, and we'll do it anyhow. I understand that this is lame duck, it's legacy time. That's understandable. And what's at play here is, this, you know, everybody has worked so hard to get Kenyatta what he really wanted, which is a second term. And he needed to reward them. And he also needed to make sure that he doesn't piss off the people who were in the last cabinet who did not deliver, and therefore give them a safe landing. But I think also what we need to understand is that Uhuru is not disinterested in his own succession. And we should begin to understand what the bigger picture is in terms of how this leads to how he shapes Kenya post him. Because if you look at our country, you know, from Mr. Kenyatta, Jomo, to Moi, to Kibaki, to Uhuru himself, this is all about establishment and legacy. And basically that establishment politics is what gives the political elite the stability that they need. So Kenyatta has to make sure that he hands the baton to somebody who will serve the primary course and kind of the primary agendas around this establishment politics. So let's look at it in that sense, that you've not thrown out these people who, again, everybody says they came from their villages. In addition, you've appointed some new people from those same places. So it's about how do you cement this going forward in terms of legacy politics.
As NASA refuses to engage with this vetting process and appointment of cabinet secretaries because they refuse to recognize President Kenyatta, they say they're going ahead with the swearing in of Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka, but the police say Uhuru Park is closed on Tuesday to any groups, whether it's Nairobi Business Community or NASA. So what happens next?
Nothing. Life will go on. The events tomorrow, the day after, and the day after that day will be normal. People will go through their work pattern. Some will go somewhere else, and life will continue. Children will go to school. Others will be, those who are sick will go to the hospital, and that's the life that will continue. There's nothing so big as to worry people. There's nothing to be concerned about. Because
I'm worried. I'm very worried with that statement. These things would happen, like there would be some form of violence. We've seen it. We've seen NASA saying we are going to do it, and Jubilee government says you're not going to do it. And ultimately violence erupts, and women and children die. Some even take advantage to, you know, rape women. We are just from listening to the Elgon issue in Sacho. Some people, that's the time for them to turn against women and children in the community. So I think, I'm still thinking that this country can be sane enough for dialogues wherever it is needed. We really now don't care who gets what at this point because of the number. As it is now, after the post-election violence, there are so many women who've still not even gotten services, who even their issues have not been responded. So this assumption that things will be fine, life will go on, things are fine, I think we need to come to reality. Violence erupts, women and children are going to suffer. We don't need violence in this country.
Let me respond.
Real quick, sir.
Yeah. Yes, there are some people who have said and made it clear they are going to make this country ungovernable. They've said that not once, but many times. There are people who have a habit of getting what they want by creating chaos. And the word dialogue, which is a camouflage for manufacturing disturbances. It's being bandied around. Instead of people obeying the law. You are the one who's been talking about the law here. Mm-hmm. We went to the elections. Years down the line, there were plans, institutions in place, mandated to supervise, to determine, to say what the right thing is. The Supreme Court. That all is followed. And then somebody wakes up and says, I don't want it. There will be no government. The country will not, even a former vice president has the audacity to stand up in public and say that he's somehow been involved in turning the country into a Somalia. They say, what's wrong with this person? And he's supposed to be a leader? So these are not issues that can be taken lightly. I agree with you. Mm-hmm. But I think we should not overplay them.
Okay.
We should not overplay them.
We shouldn't overplay, real quick, Nerima, as we complete, we shouldn't overplay the disagreement over the swearing in, and if there's any cause for alarm in the country?
I don't believe it's being overplayed. What we're talking about is decades of issues. This is not something that just happened in 2017, and we're realizing it today. And we do have Kenyan people who feel that the law is not to protect them. As soon as you feel there's a group of people who feel disgruntled and disenfranchised, we need to be concerned. Mm-hmm. Because now it's no longer an issue of basic necessary well-being. It's about making someone else feel uncomfortable as they have always felt. And we don't want to get to that situation as a country. So I do not think it's being overplayed. I think the fact that it's ignored is for us to believe that it's being overplayed. It's almost a facade of what's actually happening in our country. And there are a lot of people who do want to see the swearing in. And that is a fact of the matter. And that is something that is happening within our country. And to tell them that their beliefs are irrelevant is not in our place to do so.
And finally, Dr. Awiti.
So here's what I'm going to say. That the country is not on a path of stability, and the move on, let's have peace, let's pursue development, those things are in many ways an attempt to just gloss over the real substantive social, political, economic issues in the country. And I don't know at what point in time we're going to sit down and talk about these things, because I think the elite are running out of rope. We are the chief architects of ethnic politics in this country because it benefits us the most. The academic, the business, and the political elite. Because when we play that, we play to the gallery. And we keep hosting the poor Kenyans who, it doesn't matter what their tribe is, has got the wrong end, the short end of the stick since independence. It doesn't matter whether they come from Gatundu or they come from Sakwa, Bondo. These guys, life for them will never change. And we have failed to address those equity and equality issues.
All right.
We play on the justice part, but again, the way that the political structure is set up, this country will burst on a class warfare, and it will be unstoppable because we keep hiding behind ethnicity and we refuse to deal with the real issues about the rot and the hurting that happens in the lives of ordinary people.
All right. I want to leave it there. Did you want to respond? I think if we started, we will not end this discussion.
I almost agree with you.
Okay, fantastic. It's a great place to end it. Professor Munene, Nerima, and Teresa, and Dr. Alex Awiti, thank you all so much for coming in this evening. Hopefully in the weeks, in the months ahead, hopefully in the years ahead, we'll have more time. We should make it a regular. There's enough national issues to keep us here almost every day.
Absolutely.